Is a single blurry photo taken late at night really enough to shake the most sacred foundation of trust in the world of K-pop? Or is this the earliest sign of something that has long been hidden? That question exploded in fans' minds like lightning across a clear sky, unleashing a wave of curiosity that could no longer be contained. Within hours, the online world transformed into an unofficial courtroom where Jungkook appeared to sit as the accused, Taehyung as the silent victim, and millions of ARMY as a divided jury, torn between emotion, logic, and a trust that suddenly began to fracture. This scandal is not just ordinary gossip, nor a rumor that can be erased with a brief clarification, because what spread was not merely a photo or a video, but fragments of old clues suddenly rearranged into one massive narrative. Did Jungkook really betray Taehyung, and why were so many early warning signs ignored for so long? The story began deceptively simply, almost trivially at first glance. A visual leak surfaced on social media during the most vulnerable hours of the night, showing a figure believed to resemble Jungkook alongside a mysterious woman. No face was entirely clear, no official statement accompanied it, no definitive timestamp existed. And yet, that ambiguity was precisely its power. Uncertainty became fuel for speculation. Who was the woman? Where exactly was the location? Why did this moment only emerge now? And the most painful question for many fans, what does all of this mean for the relationship between Jungkook and Taehyung, long framed as one of the deepest emotional bonds within BTS? Since the early days of BTS's career, the dynamic between Jungkook and Taehyung has always drawn special attention. Not only because of their seemingly natural closeness on camera, but also because of body language, glances, and subtle moments that fans interpreted as proof of something beyond ordinary bandmate chemistry. Within this context, the recent leak felt like a symbolic betrayal, not only of Taehyung, but of a collective narrative built together with fans over many years. The question then sharpened into something more academic. Have audiences projected too much meaning onto the relationship between two individuals, or has the entertainment industry itself deliberately allowed that ambiguity to grow in order to sustain market loyalty? When the image spread, initial fan reactions split sharply. Some rejected it outright, dismissing it as a cheap hoax designed to damage Jungkook's reputation. They raised technical arguments, pointing to camera angles, image quality, and the possibility of digital manipulation. Others did the opposite, digging into old archives, resurfacing interviews, live broadcasts, and fleeting on-stage interactions that were now reinterpreted through a lens of suspicion. Why did Jungkook seem to avoid Taehyung's gaze more often recently? Why did a sense of distance appear in recent appearances? Was it all coincidence, or pieces of a puzzle long overlooked? At that moment, the scandal evolved from visual gossip into a collective psychological drama. Fans were no longer debating a single photo, but constructing a complex cause and effect narrative. Some recalled moments when Taehyung appeared unusually quiet while Jungkook joked with other members. Others cited old interviews in which Jungkook spoke about privacy in a tone that now sounded defensive. All of it converged into one emotional conclusion. Something had changed, and that change may have occurred long before this leak surfaced. But is it fair to center such accusations on one individual without conclusive evidence? This is where the case becomes both most troubling and most fascinating. The Jungkook and mysterious woman leak does not exist in a vacuum. It emerges within the tightly controlled ecosystem of K-pop, where public image, relationship narratives, and boundaries of privacy are subtly negotiated between agencies and audiences. In such a system, an unverified leak can have an impact far greater than the truth itself. Reputations collapse not because of facts, but because of perception. Taehyung, meanwhile, became the most discussed figure despite being the least vocal. His silence only intensified speculation. Was he hurt? Did he know something the public did not? Or did he choose silence precisely because he understood how dangerous it could be to inflame the situation further? In fandom culture, silence is often interpreted as emotional admission, even when logic suggests otherwise. But logic rarely prevails once emotion takes control. Interestingly, some fans began to invoke the idea of early clues to justify their suspicions. They spoke of schedule changes, interactions that felt forced, even facial expressions that no longer seemed synchronized. At this point, fan analysis resembled a form of semiotics, reading small signs as symbols of major shifts. Is this collective intelligence at work, or simply confirmation bias fueled by emotional disappointment? The leak also reignited broader discussions about an idol's right to a private life. On one side, many argued that Jungkook, as an adult, has every right to form relationships without public accountability. On the other, some felt betrayed, believing that the image and narrative sold to them no longer aligned with the reality now emerging. Here, the scandal transcended Jungkook and Taehyung, becoming a debate about the unwritten contract between idols and fans. Was that contract ever truly fair? The question lingered behind every harsh comment and every passionate defense. The K-pop industry is built on curated intimacy, inviting fans to feel personally connected to idols' journeys. When private reality leaks through, reactions are often disproportionate, because what feels wounded is not mere curiosity, but an emotional identity long invested. As days passed, the narrative of betrayal intensified within certain online communities. The word betrayal itself grew heavy with symbolism, suggesting that Jungkook was accused not only of a secret relationship, but of violating an emotional bond with Taehyung that fans had deemed sacred. But did that bond ever have a universally agreed definition? Or was it a meaning constructed by fans from limited, carefully curated interactions? Amid this emotional storm, one irony stood out clearly. The less official information released, the wilder speculation became. Every hour without clarification was treated as additional evidence. Every old post was reinterpreted. Every smile or silence became material for analysis. This scandal survived not on new facts, but on an information vacuum filled by collective imagination, and that is where the greatest twist emerged. Several pop culture analysts reminded audiences that this pattern is not new. Many major K-pop scandals have begun with ambiguous leaks that escalated due to emotional resonance among fans. In numerous cases, the truth that eventually surfaced proved far simpler than the dramatic narrative constructed along the way. But simplicity rarely satisfies when emotions have already been wounded. Did Jungkook truly betray Taehyung? As of now, that question remains unanswered. What is certain is that this scandal has reopened old debates about the boundary between reality and fantasy within fandom, about how minor clues can transform into major accusations, and about how fragile trust becomes when built on assumptions. Perhaps the real shock lies not in the leaked photo itself, but in the collective reaction that followed, revealing just how powerful the emotional bond between idols and fans can be, and how easily that bond can be shaken. In the end, one thing is undeniable. This scandal has left a deep emotional mark. Jungkook, Taehyung, and the fans now stand at a crossroads between waiting for clarification and accepting that not every question will receive a satisfying answer. And it is precisely there that the sharpest clickbait hides, within one simple yet haunting question. If all these early clues were truly ignored for so long, what else have we not yet seen? Beyond the immediate uproar, the scandal began to seep into quieter, more reflective corners of the fandom, where the conversation shifted from accusation to introspection. Some fans started asking uncomfortable questions about themselves rather than about Jungkook or Taehyung. Why did this particular leak hurt so deeply? Why did the presence of a faceless woman feel like a personal loss rather than a neutral fact? In these discussions, the emotional architecture of fandom was laid bare, revealing how years of storytelling, symbolism, and perceived intimacy had blurred the line between admiration and emotional dependence. The role of media amplification could not be ignored. Headlines grew sharper, thumbnails more dramatic, language increasingly absolutist. Words like exposed, betrayal, and truth revealed dominated timelines, creating a sense of urgency that pressured fans to take sides. Neutrality became almost impossible, as silence was framed as complicity and doubt was painted as denial. In this climate, Jungkook and Taehyung were no longer just artists, but symbols onto which broader anxieties about trust, authenticity, and loss were projected. What made the situation even more emotionally charged was the contrast between past and present. Old clips resurfaced showing laughter, physical closeness, and shared vulnerability, now viewed through a melancholic lens. Moments that once felt comforting were reinterpreted as ironic, even tragic. Fans asked whether those smiles had been genuine or whether they had unknowingly watched the early stages of a separation unfolding in plain sight. The past, once a safe archive of joy, became evidence in a trial no one officially sanctioned. At the same time, a quieter counter-narrative emerged, urging restraint and empathy. These voices reminded others that idols are not characters bound by fan expectations, but human beings navigating pressures few outsiders can fully understand. They argued that assuming betrayal without confirmation risks reducing complex human relationships into simplistic moral judgments. Yet even these calls for balance struggled to gain traction against the emotional momentum of the scandal, which by then had taken on a life of its own. Taehyung's continued silence remained the most emotionally loaded element of all. Every public appearance, every subtle change in expression, every song lyric he performed was scrutinized for hidden meaning. Fans debated whether his calm demeanor signaled resilience or resignation, whether it was strength or quiet heartbreak. In the absence of words, interpretation became the loudest voice, and interpretation, by nature, reflects the fears and hopes of the interpreter more than the reality of the subject. Meanwhile, Jungkook's image underwent a subtle but noticeable shift in public perception. For some, he became a symbol of shattered illusion, for others a reminder of the unfair burden placed on idols. The same action, real or perceived, produced radically different emotional outcomes depending on the viewer's prior attachment. This polarization highlighted a crucial truth. Scandals do not simply reveal information. They reveal fault lines that already exist beneath the surface. As the discourse stretched on, the original leak almost faded into the background, overshadowed by the emotional narratives built around it. Whether the photo was authentic or misleading began to matter less than what people believed it represented. It became a mirror reflecting collective insecurity about change, about growing up, and about the inevitability that no relationship, real or imagined, remains static forever. In this way, the scandal functioned less as an exposé and more as a moment of collective reckoning, and so the story continues, unresolved yet deeply etched into the emotional memory of the fandom. Not because of definitive proof, but because of unanswered questions that linger like echoes. Questions about loyalty and freedom, about illusion and reality, about how much of what fans love is truly theirs to hold on to. Perhaps the most unsettling realization is this: even if clarity eventually arrives, it may not restore what was lost, because what shattered was not just trust in a person, but belief in a narrative that once felt unbreakable. In the end, the scandal surrounding Jungkook, Taehyung, and a mysterious figure may be remembered not for what it proved, but for what it exposed within the fandom itself. A reminder that behind every dramatic headline lies a complex web of emotion, expectation, and humanity, and that sometimes the most powerful shock is not discovering something new, but realizing how fragile our assumptions always were. As the emotional dust continued to swirl, another layer of complexity quietly surfaced, one that many fans initially resisted acknowledging. The scandal began to expose the uncomfortable power imbalance between idols and their audiences, a dynamic where admiration can unconsciously turn into entitlement. The sense of betrayal felt by some fans did not arise solely from concern for Taehyung, but from the shock of realizing that Jungkook's personal life might exist beyond the carefully curated image they had internalized for years. This realization was not just disappointing. For some, it was destabilizing. In online discussions, language subtly shifted. The focus moved away from what actually happened and toward what should have happened. Jungkook was no longer judged only on actions, but on expectations fans believed he was obligated to fulfill. This moral framing transformed a private moment into a public referendum on character. In doing so, it blurred the distinction between emotional investment and moral authority, raising an unsettling question. At what point does support turn into control? Simultaneously, Taehyung's position in the narrative continued to evolve in unexpected ways. Some fans began to cast him as a symbol rather than a person, projecting onto him narratives of sacrifice, endurance, and silent suffering. While intended as sympathy, this framing risked stripping him of agency, freezing him in a role defined entirely by speculation. The irony was stark. In attempting to defend or protect him, parts of the fandom may have inadvertently confined him within another form of expectation, one just as limiting as the accusations directed at Jungkook. As weeks passed, the scandal began to intersect with broader conversations about maturity and change. BTS debuted at a young age, and many fans grew up alongside them, emotionally synchronizing their own life stages with the group's evolution. The idea that Jungkook, once seen as the youngest, most innocent figure, might now be navigating adult relationships forced fans to confront the passage of time. For some, the pain was not about betrayal at all, but about loss. The loss of an era, of a feeling, of a version of the group that could never return. This sense of loss gave the scandal its lingering power. Even in moments when discussions calmed, the emotional residue remained. Fans spoke of discomfort watching old content, of nostalgia tinged with sadness, of hesitation where there was once joy. The scandal did not erase the past, but it altered how that past was remembered. Memory itself became unstable, reshaped by present emotions rather than historical context. Meanwhile, the absence of a definitive resolution began to feel less like a temporary pause and more like a permanent state. In that uncertainty, some fans found peace, choosing to detach and reclaim a healthier distance. Others doubled down, continuing to analyze, reinterpret, and debate, driven by the belief that understanding would bring closure. Yet closure proved elusive, because the heart of the issue was never purely factual. It was emotional, symbolic, and deeply personal. What makes this moment particularly significant is not whether the accusations are ultimately proven or disproven, but how the fandom responds in the long term. Will this become a turning point toward more nuanced, empathetic engagement with idols as human beings? Or will it reinforce cycles of idealization and disillusionment that repeat with every perceived rupture? The answer remains uncertain, suspended in the same ambiguity that fueled the scandal from the start. And the quiet spaces between viral posts and heated debates, one truth slowly emerges. Scandals like this do not end when the headlines fade. They linger in perception, in trust, in the emotional contracts fans carry forward. Jungkook and Taehyung will continue their journeys, shaped by choices known and unknown, while fans are left to decide how they will carry this moment with them, whether as a wound, a lesson, or a reminder of the fragile boundary between story and reality, and perhaps that is the final, unsettling twist. The most enduring impact of this scandal may not be any revelation about Jungkook or Taehyung at all, but a revelation about the audience itself. About how easily narratives can harden into beliefs, how quickly affection can turn into accusation, and how deeply human it is to search for meaning even when certainty remains out of reach.